Record to the count. There you go. Okay. Well, welcome all. We've got 5 members of the tag and we've got 4 members of the public. We're going to, proceed as we usually do. This is a tag discussion, but I'm sure at some point we may certainly benefit from public input. But we'll start off in our usual fashion and make this and keep it as a tag discussion. We'll set some time aside at various points if we think it makes sense, and certainly at the end. The objective of this meeting is to review what Opinion Dynamics has sent back to us. We sent them a memo in Word, MS Word, and they've written back in blue font in that memo. And I hope you all had a chance to look at it before now. But if not, we're still going to go through it. I'd like to go through it bit by bit, and then go to the spreadsheet at the end, and then decide if there's anything else we want to say. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Well, our first question is under building envelope measures. Now we can pull this up, or have you done that already? Should we pull it up, Catherine?
Yeah, sure. I can share it.
Yeah, that would probably be best. This way the other folks will be able to follow along as well.
Okay, I've got it in double. Would you like me to put it in a single pane? And I highlight, that's my yellow highlights, sorry.
A single pane would be, it's really small.
All right, let's go. Make this bigger.
Okay.
That's really big. But there you go.
That's good. Okay. Our first question was about calculating the reduction effects of weatherization. This was a question about square footage. Did this make sense? We can go through the answer now if you haven't read it. I looked at it, I read the answer, and it seemed to me to make sense. This is essentially it's a square footage of the parts of the building that are insulated, so the walls and ceilings. It's done by square footage, and that seemed to make sense. Emily, Casey, you guys are the efficiency folks. Is that correct?
It seems like there's more than one way you could do it, but yes, that's what it is, how they're doing it. And so the answer worked for me.
Okay, answer
works for me too.
Okay.
There is a question embedded in there about whether or not you should assume average heating fuel mix or specific site-specific fuel mix, and they're asking for feedback.
Exactly. Do we have any immediate thoughts on that? This comes up, I think, in a couple spots.
I mean, my impression on the general, I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but is, that these are types of measures where you have the ability to put in the fuel if you know it, but not the necessity, with the thought that there, exactly could be a variety of different ways these measures can be, gotten out there. So, again, I would think that, which I believe is how it's being done, but on the EU side, but correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, I would think being able to do both is better, but I don't have a strong opinion if they want to choose one or the other.
Okay.
Lloyd?
Yeah, just a real quick note. We encountered something similar in California with regard to how much credit to provide to electric vehicle charging stations or charging outlets. Where we landed was to come down to establish a conservative default value, which then leaves it open to have site-specific sort of input if the regulated party or the credit owner wanted to get more credit. So the more granular, the more detail, that requires more site-specific information. If you don't want to bother with that, you get the default value. So something to consider in this context.
So you're saying it's up to you want the obligated party to have the opportunity to establish greater savings than the average, if it can.
Yeah, I'm just relating a similar, analogous situation in California. Whether that makes sense here or not, I'll leave it to the group for discussion.
It seems to me that this issue has been in the background of our discussions at various times. And I guess my reaction to this is that, yeah, if there's, if an OP can establish, site-specific data that, are show greater savings, specifically what's going on, it would seem to me that would be appropriate, or that, why not?
So if I understand this correctly, Rick, are you saying, or is Floyd saying that there's basically a number, accepted number for building shell improvements, but if an obligated party or an installer can demonstrate it, that the savings are greater than that accepted number, then that should count as well? Is that what, do I hear that right?
That's how I'm understanding this, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, is rather than rely on an overly generous, average figure, potentially overly generous, establish a default, conservative default value, but leave open the possibility of providing more site-specific information that would then warrant a bigger credit.
I think that makes sense, especially in the context of there will be installations of which there will be multiple clean heat strategies employed. And boy, if you were a general contractor and you could do 5 things instead of 1, but if you just claim piecemeal, or whether you can do it all together as a package, that could be a compelling enterprise.
Right.
And there may be individual steps that, synergistically add up to more savings than they would individually, right?
Right.
If you can demonstrate that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So I guess that leaves Casey and Emily, unless you has any objection to that recommendation to the tag. Either of you have any concerns about that?
I don't think I have any thoughts to add at this moment, but I think once I think through that scenario a little bit more closely, I'll be able to share any additional thoughts during the tag. But right now I'm all set.
Okay.
Before we go any further, though, we ought to establish a way that we're going to get back to the tag on this. Catherine and I can work this out, I suppose, but it's essentially got to write notes for the notes, essentially, and let the tag know what we're saying. So I guess I'm volunteering to take on that task.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, ready to go to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the next 2.
Right, okay. Partial building weatherization occurs. How will savings be calculated? What data will be used to measure? They're saying that essentially what they told us works for that, because it's a square area per insulated, square footage per insulated area calculation. So you can do that. That's how I understand that. Is that so? it essentially flows from the previous question, at least to my reading. Would you agree?
I mean, so my impression, or looking at the current TRM on the EU side right now, there's a separate air sealing measure that they have. So to me, it's, should they be including that as air sealing as a separate measure?
That's the next question.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and I think the answer to that is yes, obviously.
Yeah.
And they say in the next question here.
Oh, preserve under development. Okay. There we go. Okay. Problem solved. Sorry.
I think we're covered there. Yeah. Is that good for everyone?
All right.
Okay.
So where are you? You're on, it appears that the data on heating loads.
Yes.
Okay.
Number 4. I gotta, okay. Now this is interesting. We just have to get back to them with what we had in mind. I don't remember who raised this issue. But I'll talk to Matt. We can talk to Matthew, certainly. So there's a question there. And I just don't know what it was that that prompted us to say that. So I would,
Is that
that's something
TJ? I think that was TJ that might have raised that.
well, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So asking Matt about it, because TJ, I believe, is on vacation. And we can get that straightened out and have it ready for discussion for the tag. Does that make sense, folks? Okay. Well, then let's go to the next one. Ew. Okay, this is, they give us, they respond to our question about, Casey, this was yours, actually. They're responding to our question about getting to the source material beyond the TRMs, and they're not showing a great deal of enthusiasm for doing so. But they do say that they'll do both.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's just like, I found it to be a bit much to like ask to review this, but then every footnote is like, go see this other document, and then that document that says go see a third document.
Right. They're making the argument. This is fine, it seems to me as well, but they're making the argument that essentially it's like, gee, it's your TRMs. We're just using what you gave us. It's sort of the way I read that. And
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. The next one, will OD make the documents it references available to us? And so that seemed fine. In most, they'll do what they can in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, my impression was they were in touch with Efficiency Vermont, who's kind of they obviously are to a larger extent, and Ben Plotsker is done things, so I don't see when that would come up, what they're talking about, but the answer is fine, I guess.
Okay.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Right. A quick question. Not on this specifically, but kind of thematically related to some questions I had raised at the last meeting, which is, not so much will they provide these, which of course is important, but when, right?
Okay.
If you provide it after the concrete's been poured, it's a little bit late at that point to kind of make use of that information, right?
Okay. Gotcha. So we'll just add to it. I mean, when we meet next week, we'll say, and right away, if you can, as soon as possible. Yeah.
As soon as possible. Yeah. Thank you.
No, that's a good point.
Just to add on to what Casey was saying, Opinion Dynamics and Ben are still working together on sharing TRM resources. So if there is stuff from Vermont TRMs that would be helpful to be available, we can continue to work with them to make sure that everyone has access to the information we need if it's appropriately needed.
Okay. Right.
All right, residential HVAC.
That where we are now? Okay, the first of that. Okay, hang on. Let's see. Oh, actually, would you just go back? I want to make sure I've got them. Well, so let's see. I mean, I'm actually taking these notes question by question. So the what sources of data, that one's okay too. What sources of data will be used? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, then let's go to the next then. I'm turning to Casey and Emily for this one. Matt, you too. Is this, are we okay with this answer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I raised this issue, but yeah, it seems reasonable to me.
Seems reasonable to me as well. We don't have any comments on this one.
Yeah, and I had the same reaction, but
Okay,
a little out of my depth. Okay. Okay, regarding lifetime emission savings. This one seemed reasonable to me as well. Okay, so that is good. Number 10. They're not numbered, but I've got them. Okay, this is about advanced thermostats
cooling loads.
on cooling loads, right? Correct, thank you. My reaction to this was it was a reasonable answer, but again, I feel that I want to defer to those of you who have a better sense of this.
Can someone, based on the comments, we intend to keep heat pumps as an eligible system for this measure, but derate the heating savings according to the estimated proportion of heat pumps in Vermont residential heating systems.
Yep.
Can
We
someone
need to
translate that for me? I don't quite understand what that means.
Yeah, I didn't. Thank you for bringing that up, Matt. I didn't understand it either. Thank you.
Derate heating savings according to the proportion of heat pumps in Vermont residential heating systems.
So this is the measure that we're talking about here is advanced thermostats, right? And so I think their point is just, if you were looking at it just as like the average BTUs that a house needs, you would come to the wrong answer if you didn't kind of take into the a few things. One is like the heat pumps may not be benefiting from the setbacks that the advanced thermostats provide, and just the general different characteristics of the heat pumps is how I was reading that.
I was reading it as, and I may be way off, but estimated proportion of heat pumps, meaning if you have a 3,000 square foot home and you have one little mini split, that's not going to cover your load, regardless of. But maybe I'm reading this wrong.
Well, I mean, my impression is that these are mostly they've been delivered, where we don't necessarily know the heating system, and so it's going to be going in as a blend of heating equipment. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah.
So I have lost track of where you are because I can't find that reference. Is it you've gone on to the next one?
It may be the next one.
Yeah. Okay. This
sorry,
one,
did I
all right,
skip
that's
ahead?
where you
I'm
are.
sorry.
You're on to the next one, okay.
Well, let's see, is it,
I don't know if you've finalized your cooling load responses. Everybody was okay with that one?
yeah, go back to the one that we were just talking about. Yes, Matt, you were one ahead of us, which is fine, yes, I think we're okay with this.
So quick question, this highlighted language that's in opinion dynamics response.
No,
It
it was Catherine who highlighted.
Yeah, that's my highlighting.
okay. No, I'm glad you highlighted it. Am I reading this that OD is suggesting providing a qualitative discussion of the benefits of cooling impacts from advanced thermostats, but not necessarily quantifying it for purposes of getting clean heat credits? Is that the idea here?
If you're asking, I think the answer to your question is yes, but there's still, they may even be saying that they'd be willing to quantify such impacts, but keep them separate because they wouldn't be eligible for clean heat credits.
Yeah, so it would be kind of a acknowledgement, perhaps, of the benefits off the books. Yeah. With a potential signal for that to be taken up through additional changes down the road.
Right.
If I'm reading that correctly. All right, thank you.
Okay, right.
All right, now. Same
Now,
effect.
so let's of advanced.
I think I'm not sure we've, Matt, your question has been satisfied in terms of whether or not we understand the response.
We're not aware of heat pump specific studies on advanced thermostats. But expect that the savings potential would be much lower if temperature setbacks are not available as a control strategy. Okay, they're going to make this a strategy for heat pumps, but they're going to derate the heating savings according to the estimated proportion of heat pumps in Vermont residential heating systems. Yeah, I'm not sure I do understand that. Because now it's not about cooling, it's about essentially load management of heat pumps. So what would the derate, I think we would just ask, what would the derating represent? What does it mean? I'm not following it, but doesn't mean it's not sensible. Casey, Emily, anybody have an idea? And
Yeah, I mean, especially just looking at the EU measure, the fossil fuel savings are based on fossil heat times the thermostat savings. So there's not like yeah, I think just more, could you expand on that point? What exactly do you mean? Is if I have a follow-up?
Yep, that's easy. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Electricity.
Yeah, electricity, and I was fine with that response on marginal emissions for now. They're still working on it. There's some debate about just how to go about it, and that's fine. That was fine with me.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Real quick. I think this is a really important question, and I'm glad they're kind of still mulling it. Just to analogize back to the California program, we do have a 24-hour time of use table of emission factors for the electricity grid, and that's for this very reason, where you don't want to, the state decided they don't want to be encouraging high use of electricity during those times when the renewables, part of the grid is at its lowest, right? Because that's a step backwards, obviously. I think that's an important point, and that needs to be kind of discussed at greater length here, because I certainly would not want to see, kind of perverse consequences happening from just kind of a first level sort of look at these things. I think to the extent we can, or to the extent the state can, having that granularity on an hour by hour basis, I think would make a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I also happen to think that that kind of granularity, for it to be meaningful, and there's some serious issues here. It needs to relate, and we've talked about this before. I believe it needs to relate to the long-term arc of the changing system that Vermont employs to meet its needs. So this question of what becomes marginal or incremental, I guess, is a better way of thinking about it in the way of emissions, really needs to be thought through, given how we expect our portfolio to change.
Yeah, and California reassesses and publishes a new 24-hour time of use schedule each year, just to account for the changes in the grid.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So now we're at heat pump water heaters.
Yep.
So sorry, can we just on that for just a little longer? What are we proposing now exactly?
Nothing except to say that we want to see more granularity. They're still working it out, and the more granularity, the better. So that the use of electricity is tied to the time of production and the emissions at production.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it just becomes a difficult question with, RECs and renewability generally being measured on an annual basis. And then certainly the other TRMs are focused more on like off peak, on peak, not sub 24 or 365 type things. So anyway, yeah.
Okay. Well, that they're still working on it, so we can
sit back. I love it.
Yeah. And well, I can make the point. I also, yeah, I hear you. Okay. So heat pump water heaters, measure characterizations. Oh, right. 55 gallon. This response seemed reasonable to me. Again, I just say this to start the conversation.
Yeah. So again, I think at the end of the day, if they do it the same way that the EU does it, we're going to end up with a TRM that has higher savings, higher credits, whatever you want to call it, for a smaller capacity unit, which is what it is, but is not probably how it is out there in the world. So,
well, that was the concern.
Anyway, just giving them a little opening to do their own thing TRM wise, but yeah, they certainly answered the question and agreed. Their answer is correct. Actually.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, you slid it up so that it's at the top of the page, the system that's being replaced. Okay.
Do you take into account what's being replaced? And the answer is yes.
Yes. Replace. Any reactions to that? This a reasonable answer to what we asked? I'll take silence as an okay.
Rupert coming in.
Okay.
Okay, and then,
Hello, Emily. You can join the conversation. Obviously, we're moving ahead. We're at what is now the 15th question that we asked in our memo, and we're looking at the responses that Opinion Dynamics gave us. They inserted blue text in our memo to answer our questions. So we're here on heat pump water heaters, the second bullet under heat pump water heaters. Or maybe the third, actually. And that's the question. Do the calculations account for?
yeah.
And if I understood this, it's really about consumption, not tank volume. Does that seem reasonable to folks? Okay.
All right. Low flow aerators. This was a question that was raised by how they operate.
And that was interesting. They're not aware of the effect that we thought might be an effect. And they're just following our other TRM.
Didn't they say something in the last tag, or maybe two tags about this?
Oh, come a little closer to your, I mean, I can't hear you all of a sudden. Sorry, Emily.
Oh, weird. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was gonna say, didn't they say something in one of the last couple tags about they just kind of explained this and how, yeah, it's more about the flow of water. I feel like I just remember Opinion Dynamics giving a brief explanation about this in one of the last tags, and it made sense to me.
Okay.
Next one, I guess, is the same answer since it's the same question.
Yep. Yep.
All right, so we're on residential induction stovetops.
My handwriting is deteriorating.
Well, I'm typing, so you're saved.
Oh, good. Thank you. I don't know that there's much to add here, except that they plan to keep it in the list.
Yeah, so this is interesting because there's lots of moving parts here. The decision tentative that we're now putting cooktops, gas cooking under thermal to be finalized later versus whether you get a credit for installing an electric stove and removing a gas stove versus what that savings is and should it be counted. I think this is okay, right? This is just sort of saying it's on the list. We don't know what the end utility will be of that analysis, but do I have that right? Where they are going to look at it, but we don't quite know yet whether there'll be a value associated with doing such a measure based on other decisions that are beyond Opinion Dynamics. I think that's my synopsis.
Well, they're certainly saying that they expect further guidance from the PUC. So if if that guidance comes out of the moving parts you're thinking of, Matt, well then, yeah.
My understanding was that the PUC in the last TAG meeting shared that in the next check back report, I think it's in September, we'd hear some sort of feedback from the PUC to the legislature.
Yeah.
Am I misremembering? I thought Deirdre said that the PUC had a memo that said it will be in, that cooking is included.
So for now, like my understanding was that Deirdre was saying that for now they're going to include it because that's the PUC's interpretation of the statute's definition of thermal. But I feel like I remember Deirdre saying something about noting the complexities of this to the check back report in September. And so I think that even though it's going to be included for now, it's not the end of the story. And that was just my interpretation for what Deirdre said.
Yeah, that's accurate. To put another way to say it, the people that sell fuel enter into Vermont were told in January to back out all gallons that weren't used for heating air or heating water. And so they did. And now they're trying to recognize that RCI emissions includes more than just heating air and heating water.
Right.
So now if we're going to use that, then we need to consider all of the consumption of fuels that's used for beyond heating air and heating water. And then we need to think about all the measures to reduce that consumption, one would assume, which would include cook stops, but could include a whole range of other things because heating fuel is used for more than just heating. And that I don't feel is settled. And I think that needs to be settled either by the PUC in an order, not in a memo, or in a change in statute.
Okay, that's fine. But I mean, this doesn't, yeah, they're just the consultant.
Yeah, no complaints against opinion dynamics here. I'm just
No, right,
saying.
no, that's fine, yeah. They included measure costs, you know. And all when we had this discussion, it was, you know, it came up under with respect to stovetops, but after we met and I drafted the memo, I went back through all the measures and saw that cost had been included with all of them in one way or the other, and so that the numbers are there, and that's what they're saying here. So, yeah, it was just okay.
So there's no responses here because the same responses apply.
Right.
And then we get down to their questions to you.
Right. Okay. It's easy to see. Okay. Well, what approach should we? I mean, this is a big question. Go ahead, Matt. I start with it.
Just a clarification. What do they mean by heating fuel inputs?
Well, good question.
About gallons? Or are they talking about?
I assume they were talking about, yeah, gallons, or, you know, in the second one they talk about an average fuel mix. So I presume that's, you know, BTUs, right? Or I mean the equivalent. But yeah, that's how I understood it.
Average mix or site-specific input for heating fuel inputs.
Well,
this goes back to the first question you discussed at the top of the list, where they talked about how they determine savings relative to what's being switched out.
Oh.
Do you base it on the average fuel mix of the state in homes, or do you base it on the site specific? So you kind of talked about that already.
Or the average, because obviously it's different for fuel, because fuels have different BTUs and different units of measurement if it's natural gas. yeah, do you do it on the average home? We can say the average home in Vermont, I haven't checked it recently, but 720 gallons or whatever is whatever you would, get a standard, this piece of equipment is going to reduce that by this much, and then you collect that, the gallons not used as they're multiplied by whatever as your savings, or do you just look at the aggregate gallons, or do you do site specific and say, no, this house was a big guzzler of heating oil, used 1,400 gallons. Now we've weatherized, we've done this, we've done this, and we've done this, and now it's 700 gallons. I don't know.
That would be
what they're asking. I just don't know what the answer is.
well. Wouldn't that be A, where you have the opportunity to establish what happened on a particular site?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of some of these older homes, larger homes, and the amount of money it will take to make a significant dent in their consumption. It's going to take weatherization, air sealing, new pieces of equipment, maybe some biofuels, and that's going to be a bigger bill than, say, just installing a heat pump in a 1,200 square foot home. So should they get more credit because they have to spend more money?
Well, is it because they spend more money or because they produce greater savings?
Well, both. Yeah. They're going to produce greater savings, but in order to produce greater savings, they have to do more than just one thing.
Yeah.
Or multiples of those one things.
Right. I think just following what we said in response to the first question, I think that A is certainly something that we were amenable, we seem comfortable with.
Allow for either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I understand that.
So the other later options here, which were D and E particularly, seem like they're sort of saying, allowing for either, but setting criteria for when you would be allowed to use either, as opposed to leaving it up to the obligated party.
Right.
Just wondering if that seems less, it kind of forces some in some cases site-specific calculations.
I don't know. I really didn't like E, but I'm not sure.
You don't like it because of
both D and E seem to me to restrict options for obligated parties. They seem slightly restrictive. In other words, they may be administratively simpler, but they may be more restrictive than we want to be. That was my reaction to those two.
And I hate to be and everyone can cover their ears or take a sip of tea, but when we talk about fuel switching, we are going to have a significant number of credit generating activities that do not actually switch, they just reduce. Whether you're adding, you could add a heat pump and add biodiesel and significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but that's not, neither of them is technically switching if you're still.
Right, but their vocabulary, in opinion dynamics vocabulary, fuel switching is installed measures. That's just how they've been using it.
No, it just bugs me so much. I guess that's a me thing.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. That's fine. Obviously, switching from fuel oil to biodiesel is a form of fuel switching. But you could do two. Yes.
Switching, and then one would, when a normal person might go, well, how am I switching if I'm doing two different? I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, you're doing two different things. You'd want, in this vocabulary, as I understand it, if you install a heat pump and still you're using some residual, combustion, but it's biofuel, both of those activities can be measured, and that'd be great. In fact, that's the sort of thing that I wouldn't want in any way to, I don't think I want obligated parties to be prevented from establishing greater savings than some deemed savings from, some notion of an average kind of action like that. So that's why I don't actually like C and D. I suppose it's really where I'm coming. It's just me. If we want, as a number of us have said, we want obligated parties to have as many opportunities and use as much creativity as possible to solve these problems, to meet their obligations. So that's why I think A is the appropriate answer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't see these as circle one.
I
weren't sure if they were talking to each other or if they were individual.
don't know. It seemed to me that D and E are alternatives, but if I'm
Yes.
misunderstanding,
I think they're asking you to weigh in on which is preferable of
Okay.
the options.
Okay.
Provide a different one.
My opinion is A.
so I go with A personally. But we can have this conversation. We can reiterate this conversation, or go through it again with the tag. But I would lean toward A.
Anybody else have a preference?
Yeah, again, same of leaning towards A, especially because it seems like if you write it that way, then if we make the decision to go one way or the other, the last minute or whatever, you have both of them available and ready to go.
Okay.
All right. So then they want you to weigh in on the decarbonization summary table example where they show you a heat pump savings calculation over time. You want me to bring that up?
Please do.
All right.
I started looking at it. I hope others did too.
Emily, sorry.
No worries. I had some high level feedback on that table. I'm fine to wait.
Oh, good.
Pull it up first.
Is this the decarbonization summary example table?
Yes.
Okay. I have it. Yep.
Why can't I make it bigger? Well, I can show it to you. I'm not sure why it doesn't. Oh, maybe because that. Yeah, there you go. All right. I'll make it big enough for you to see. And let's start with the assumptions. So let me reshare here.
Okay, so I'm sorry, because I gotta leave at 3. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how much budgeted, but so if I interpret this correctly, they're suggesting a heat pump will continue to perform for 17 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right.
I understood it.
Although they just at the end, you'll see that they're saying this is not an actual calculation. This is just exemplary. So don't take it the assumptions too seriously.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what the average lifespan of a heat pump is. That seems long, but I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
I think they just picked a number.
Yeah. Okay.
What I found of interest in this was, one of the things that I found of interest is their recognition that emissions from the electricity grid are going to change over time, and that creates some questions about how those emissions changes should be captured. But after that, it's my review of it was that, well, I didn't actually have that much time, so I shouldn't say that I felt like it was making sense to me entirely.
Lloyd and Emily had some thoughts.
Yep.
You said you wanted to weigh in earlier.
Yeah. So just at a high level, I think I'm noting that they're starting to run into the complex nature of awarding credits for individual measures on an annual basis. So at this point, on the focus of the complexity and the numerous outcomes, Efficiency Vermont is supporting awarding a full lifetime credit value for the installed measures versus that annual basis.
awarding of what?
A full lifetime credit value versus that annual credit value that you see. Just again, focusing on that. Numerous outcomes and the complexity of doing this for individual installed measures every year.
Well, so sorry. I'm assuming that, okay, so line, what is it? 17 here is, the credits per year. But, what the delivery agent, for lack of a word, would get at the end of the day is that some of that, so 1,600 credits. And that would be, what's put in their bank or their box or whatever, whoever they're holding it.
Oops, sorry.
Do you think this is saying that they would get 92, 93, whatever credits per year? Because I was reading it as like, okay, this is the calculation that would be done that you'd be able to calculate from their new TRM. But at the end of the day, it's the 1612, is what I'm showing is the sum for line 17 that you're, taking to the bank, as it were. And then, again, so when they then update the TRM again, they'd be saying, oh, okay, now the grid emissions have changed like this. So you're getting 1630 or you're getting 1550 or whatever the, number ends up being.
I think that was the point.
Yeah. Okay.
Was that even that change adds enough complexity?
Sure.
Lloyd?
Yeah, so two things. So going back to my earlier point about the 24-hour time of use, this sort of calculation might make more sense in conjunction with the use of a smart thermostat. You can do an average grid sort of calculation, and then that would presumably show kind of a decreasing over time of the grid average CI. But if you're also using a smart thermostat, perhaps you could couple that with kind of time of use CI for the grid electricity. So that's one point. My bigger point, and I don't know if I'm understanding this correctly because I just quickly scanned it, but I'm having issues with kind of the negative signs on some of these, particularly on the natural gas impacts. So maybe someone can help me understand this because my simple mind is not, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this. So when I look at a calculation like this, I'm thinking this is trying to show me what the impacts are going to be going from baseline to some strategy, right? So if your baseline is natural gas and you're going to electricity, you'll get X amount. But when I look at the line 6, row 6, and I see negative 100, is that okay? So those are in energy units. So are they saying you would be using 100 megajoules less of natural gas by switching over? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Say above. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Maybe that makes more sense because I was thinking it almost looks like when I first looked at it, it was like, oh, that looks like it's an increase in natural gas because it's negative on the other side, and therefore increases the emissions from the natural gas. But if you're doing it relative to a baseline, that doesn't really make sense, right? Because I was thinking natural gas to natural gas, that would be a zero impact. But I guess this calculation is doing something different.
Right.
Okay. I think that clarifies it for me.
Okay. We should discuss this. I think we should spend a little more time on our own looking at this spreadsheet and then come back to when we meet with the tag, go through this a little bit in a little bit more detail. Because I haven't had a chance to go column by column through it. And the points, Emily, that you and Casey are making, I think are critical points. And one thought that's been in my head, and I don't know if it's, and I think it's relevant to what you folks are saying, is how do we deal, if we install a heat pump today and we assume these emissions effects, both positive and negative, from, avoiding natural gas and then using more electricity. If we line up all the credits for the measure, if the credits are awarded on an annual basis, and I hear what you're saying, Emily, but if they're awarded on an annual basis, do we in fact adjust those credits 3 years from now when we know that the electric grid has changed? Or is it, for the measure that we've done this year, that's what it's going to be? And while we may see that the emissions of the grid have changed from, 3 years from now from what we expected them to be today, that only affects measures on a going forward basis. That question came up for me. I don't know if it actually is one that we should, that is captured here, but it seemed like that would be part of the question. In other words,
so in their assumptions, they actually address that up above. If you look at line, well, it's all in one.
Yeah, and I did read this, but tell me which line you're looking at.
So it'd be the third paragraph under line in assumptions at the top of the text.
Then would fix the annual credit, so for the life of the measure, even if analysis in future years. Yes, okay, that does answer so I missed that, obviously. Yes, well, that's good. I missed it, but that was something that came up, and sorry to take the time on that one. And that's the way it should be. You're not going to go back and change. That would be, people are making decisions on the basis of them. You don't do that. But thank you, Catherine. But I would say that we all ought to take a closer look at this. And when we come back next week, a week from today, and discuss this, we give the others in the tag a chance to really give some thought on this one in particular, because and we'll urge them in our agenda to give some thought to this then.
Has the larger tag received this, or was this just this breakout group?
No, they have not. I've not sent it to the larger tag. So we would need to do that with the agenda and the memo.
Right.
From you guys. And
well, three things. This memo, their memo to us, and our response to it.
Right.
And this. So I will try to gin up something over the weekend that will accompany the two items that we're talking about. That'll be great. Are there other points folks want to raise? I do want to open up to members of the public if they may have some insights and some questions that we will benefit from. But if I'm going to make sure we've said everything we need to at this point. Okay, well then I will. Folks, there are 5 of you, members of the public. If any would like to speak, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay. Then we're all set, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. I'll try to frame something in a short memo to the full tag that, with Catherine's devoutly to be wished help will get us give the tag an idea of what we're thinking here. So enjoy. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Thank you for the time, all of you. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Catherine. Talk to you in a little bit.